let's get into then your journey to enduring success. And the first critical choice I made was to pick up the phone when my sister called. Now, for me in that moment, that was a profound first choice. I've since made a whole bunch of first choices that were much more practical, much more practical to that. But what I've learned is that success really begins with making a first choice. Is there a first choice? I'm sure you've made several, but is there one that you'll share with us that's impacted your journey?
Sure. And this is a fairly late in life first choice, actually, but having to make a career transition in 2008, you may recall there was a small dip in the economy that upset a lot of our trajectories. And I had to shift gears. And I remember one of the things I said, because I had a little bit of time off there, was I had been writing my entire life pretty much as long as I can remember, and it had been part of my life, my work. But it was when I was coming out of that, deciding what to do next, I said, I am going to be a writer. Like I will say that is what I do. And so that was a big step because I had always been afraid to do that. It was like, okay, I know I'm reasonably good at this. I've gotten good grades. I've been able to get paid for, writing press releases and things like that. But when you actually come out and say you were a writer, now you're trying to say, I'm stepping into the big leagues. Am I good enough that if an editor looks at this or someone else or goes out in the marketplace, and the big fear was, so what if I suck, right? If you go out and say, this is what I am, and then the world says, well, yeah, who cares?
Oh,
Then what do you do? But I said, you know what? At this point in my life, I was 50 years old at the point, and I said, you know what? Let's just go do it. I think I trust myself. I think I'm good enough, or I'll get better enough to do this, and it's now or never. So that was the first choice, and that's made a lot because it's gone into much more a much broader writing career, writing books and articles, and it also that led into teaching and speaking and all the other things. So it's been that choice led to a lot of other really interesting places.
but that's really, and Eric, I didn't know that about, like, I know you're a writer, right? I know you've got several books. I know you teach, but I didn't realize that you made a choice to say, I'm a writer. That's a, right. That is a big deal. And so tell me just a little bit, just tell us a little bit about some of the books that you've written. And then when you say that got you into teaching, what was the transition there?
So
I'm just curious.
yeah, no, and it really is interesting declaring yourself. I think that's one of the things. And I had in my younger years, I moved a lot when I was young. I changed jobs. I've had a very diverse and somewhat serendipitous career. So to say you're any one thing was almost it was very very
Mhm.
challenging for me because I had been a bit of a chameleon, and I could shift as needed and was sort of a utility infielder. So to declare something was really a big deal. But it was in that moment when I was uh, leaving one job that was ending and having to find something else. And I sat down with a couple of people who I knew professionally, and they said, "Could you help us write a book?" And I'd never written a book, and I said, "Unemployment, write a book? Sure, I can help you write a book." Now I'd written articles, I've written press releases, and
Mhm.
I actually had written I had a draft of a novel, which was really awful. But I said, I can do this. And so that piece was okay, help us write a book. So I came and dove into that. And that was the first book, which is a book called Renegotiating Healthcare, which is about negotiation and conflict resolution in healthcare and related settings. I teach that now at Harvard and elsewhere, that particular topic, which is that was more of a textbook, but it was good because in there is a novel. It's both a textbook, but then there's a story that winds through the entire book that we had to write that
Mhm.
shows the concepts in action, which then led to other writing. And so there's a couple of ebooks I've written. One's called Your Critical First 10 Days as a Leader, and another one called Three Critical Shifts to Make as a Leader. But those are shortish, 5,000, 6,000 word ebooks. And that
Yeah.
led to the one over my shoulder, which is called You're It, Crisis Change and How to Lead When It Matters Most, that came out in 2019. And that really does capture the program I work at Harvard called the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative. My colleagues and I, our now 20 years of work in the field, deploying to disasters, being with
Mhm.
leaders in the midst of crises, trying to capture those stories as well as the principles and the techniques they use to navigate through them. And and that was such a great adventure because again, I had been in publishing. I knew that world a bit, which helped us navigate it. But then having to put it together and again assemble the stories and make sure you've got the right collection, what's right for this, what's right for that, how does it flow and be really useful for a reader. That was good. I've got another book in the works now, which is looking forward and looking at how we lead through these really complex challenges like climate
Yeah.
change and biodiversity loss and social stress, enormously high social stress. How do we lead, which I think is very different than we've led traditionally in organizations. Um, but that as part of the writing in doing my work for Harvard and deploying to disasters, I started writing case studies to capture those lessons in shorter form. And I had worked at Harvard Business School, so I had never taught a case study, but I had seen the best in the world teach case studies. And so I asked my colleagues who were at the School of Public Health, I said, have you ever taught with cases? And they said, no, we've done like little snippets, but so I said, can I give it a shot? And so I get up in front of a class and I taught a case the way I had seen the people at Harvard Business School teach it. And I had fun. I really liked it. And so I was, fair, I would say at best to start, but I knew a couple tricks so I could get through it. But that then led to I actually wound up in an academic role for the last 10 or so years at Harvard. And also teaching other programs, other schools, but really enjoyed that. Just helping people learn, helping ignite that little fire of curiosity, and seeing the light in their eyes. It's like, oh yeah, that's cool. I get that, or I've got a question. That really it's such an engaging way to be able to make a living.
That's just awesome. And I appreciate that the first choice you shared was later in life. I totally appreciate your perspective. And then I'll move us on, but your perspective on why it's hard to make first choices. Because in your instance, I think what you shared here with me was, oh my gosh, but is this the identity? And what if I'm not good? And what if people don't view me as a writer? But that's what I say I am. What if they don't see me as that? And there's all these things that come in and around us, I think, that become barriers to making first choices. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. To check out more episodes, go to www.trishkendall.com/podcast, or go to any of your favorite podcast channels, including YouTube, under Trish Kendall Speaks, and you'll find this interview and more. Choose and become.